Thank you all for coming, eventually watching when I turn this into a video. Thank you all. Let's get on to the next chapter of the next, or whatever book this is. 4. Morality and psychoanalysis. Psychoanalysis? Whatever that is. I've said that we should never get a Christian society... I've said that we should never get a Christian society unless most of us become Christian individuals. That does not mean, of course, that we can put off doing anything about society until some imaginary date in the far future. It means that we must begin both jobs at once. The job of seeing how do you, as would be done by, and can be applied in detail to modern society. And 2, the job of becoming the sort of people who would really apply it if we saw how. I now want to begin considering what the Christian idea of a good man is. The Christian specification for the human machine. Before I come down to details, there are 2 more general points I should like to make. First of all, since Christian morality claims to be a technique for putting the human machine right, I think you would like to know how it is related to another technique which seems to make a similar claim, namely psychoanalysis. That's such a weird word. 1 second. Excuse me, sorry. Now you want to distinguish very clearly between 2 things. Between the actual medical theories and technique of the psychoanalysis and the general philosophical view of the world which Freud, I think that's how you say that, and others have gone on to add to this. The second thing, the philosophy of Freud, is in direct contradiction to the other great psychologist, Jung? And furthermore, when Freud is talking about how to cure neurotics, he's speaking as a specialist on his own subject. When he goes on to talk a general philosophy, he's speaking as an amateur. It is therefore quite sensible to attend to him with respect in the one case and not in the other. Okay, I'm saying. And that is what I do. I am all the readier to do it because I have found that when he is talking of his own subject and on a subject I do not know something about, namely language, he is very ignorant. But psychoanalysis itself, apart from all the philosophical additions that Freud and others have made it to be, is not in the least contradictory to Christianity. Its technique overlaps with Christian morality at some points, and it would not be a bad thing if every person knew something about it. But it does not run the same course all the way, for the 2 techniques are doing rather different things. Okay, I think he's saying with trusting this person in their subject of expertise as opposed to something that they're not necessarily a master in, which makes sense. When a man makes a moral choice of 2 things, 2 things are involved. One is the act of choosing, the other is the various feelings, impulses, and so on which his psychological outfit presents him with, and which are the raw material of his choice. Now this raw material may be of two kinds. Either it may be what we would call normal, it may consist of those sort of feelings that are common to all men, or else it may consist of quite unnatural feelings due to things that have gone wrong in his subconscious. Thus, fear of things that are really dangerous would be an example of the first kind, an irrational fear of cats or spiders would be an example of the second kind. The desire of a man for a woman would be of the first kind. The perverted desire of a man for a man would be the second. Now, what psychoanalysis undertakes to do is remove the abnormal feelings. That is, to give the man better raw material for his acts of choice. Morality is concerned with the acts of choice themselves. Put it in this way. Imagine 3 men go to war. One has the ordinary, natural fear of danger that any man has, and he subdues it by moral effort and becomes a brave man. Let us suppose that the other 2 have, as a result of things in their subconscious, exaggerated, irrational fears, which no amount of moral effort can do anything about. Now suppose that a psychoanalyst comes along and cures those 2. That is, he puts them both back in the position of the first man. Well, it is just then that the psychoanalytical problem is over and the moral problem begins, because now that they are cured, these 2 men might take quite different lines. The first might say, "Thank goodness, I got rid of all those doodahs. Now, at last, I can do what I always wanted to do, my duty to my country." Excuse me. But the other might say, "Well, I am very glad that I now feel moderately cool under fire. But of course, that doesn't alter the fact that I'm still jolly when determined to look after number 1 and let the other chap do the dangerous job whenever I can." Indeed, one of the good things about feeling less frightened is I can now look after myself much more efficiently and can be much clever at hiding the fact from the others. Now this difference is purely a moral one, and psychoanalysis cannot do anything about it. However, much you improve the man's raw material, you still have got something else, the real free choice of man. On a material presented to him, either you put his own advantage first or to put it last. And this free choice is the only thing that morality is concerned with. The bad psychological material is not a sin, but a disease. It does not need to be repented of, but to be cured. And by the way, that is very important. Human beings judge one another by their external actions. God judges them by their moral choices. When a neurotic who has a pathological horror of cats forces himself to pick up a cat for some good reason, it is quite possible that in God's eyes, he has shown more courage than a healthy man may show in winning the VC. I don't know what that is. When a man who has been perverted from his youth and taught that cruelty is the right thing, does some tiny little kindness or refrains from some cruelty he might have committed, and thereby perhaps risk being sneered at by his companion, he may, in God's eyes, be doing more than you and I would do if we gave up life itself for a friend. That's a little wild to think about, but he's got a point. It is as well to put this the other way around. Some of us, who seem quite nice people, may in fact have made so little use of a good heredity and a good upbringing that we are really worse than those whom we regard as friends. Can we be quite certain how we should have behaved if we have been saddled with the psychological outfit, and then with the bad upbringing, and then with the power, say, of Himmler? I don't know who that is. That is why Christians are told not to judge. We see only the results which a man's choice makes out of his raw material. But God does not judge him on the raw material at all, but what he has done with it. Most of the man's psychological makeup is probably due to his body. When his body dies, all that will fall off him, and the real central man, the thing that shows, that made the best or the worst of his material, will stand naked. All sorts of nice things which we thought on our own, but which were really due to a good digestion, will fall off some of us. All sorts of nasty things which were due to complexes or bad health will fall off others. This is worded a little weirdly. We shall then for the first time see everyone as he really was. There will be surprises, and that leads on to my second point. People often think of Christian morality as a kind of bargain, in which God says, if you keep a lot of rules, I'll reward you. And if you don't, I'll do the other thing. I do not think that is the best way of looking at it. I would much rather say that every time you make a choice, you are turning the central part of you, the part of you that chooses, into something a little different from what it was before. And taking your life as a whole, with all your innumerable choices, all your life long, you are slowly turning this central thing either into a heavenly creature or into a hellish creature. Either into a creature that is in harmony with God and with the other creatures and with itself, or else into one that is in a state of war and hatred with God and with its fellow creatures, and with itself, of course. To be the one kind of creature is heaven. That is, it is joy and peace and knowledge and power. To be the other means madness, horror, idiocracy, rage, importance, and internal loneliness. Impotence, and eternal loneliness. Each of us at each moment is progressing to the one state or the other. That's kind of what I was getting at. That explains what always used to puzzle me about Christian writers. They seem to be so very strict at one moment and so very free and easy at another. They talk about mere sins of thought as if they were immensely important, and then they talk about the most frightful murders and treacheries as if you had only got to repent and all would be forgiven. But I have come to see that they are right. What they are always thinking of is the mark which the action leaves on that tiny central self which no one sees in this life, but which each of us will have to endure or enjoy forever. One man may be so placed that his anger sheds the blood of thousands, and another so placed that however angry he gets, he will only be laughed at. But the little mark on the soul may be much the same in both. Each has done something to himself, which unless he repents, will make it harder for him to keep out of the rage next time he is tempted, and will make the rage worse when he does fall into it. Each of them, if he seriously turns to God, can have that twist in the central man straightened out again. Each is, in the long run, doomed if he will not. The bigness or smallness of the thing, seen from the outside, is not what really matters. One last point. Remember that, as I said, the right direction leads not only to peace, but to knowledge. When a man is getting better, he understands more and more clearly the evil that is still left in him. When a man is getting worse, he understands his own badness less and less. A moderately bad man knows he is not very good. A thoroughly bad man thinks he is all right. This is common sense, really. Love that. This is common sense, really. You understand sleep when you are awake, not while you are sleeping. You can see mistakes in arithmetic when your mind is working properly. While you are making them, you cannot see them. You can understand the nature of drunkenness when you are sober, not when you are drunk. Good people know about both good and evil, good people do not know about either. That's actually, that might be the best like ending to any one of these chapters I've ever read. Actually, I love that. That's really good. That's yeah. See, I think it's like these last little paragraph points like this, of like almost like a one-liner type of thing, where he's just saying that you can't, you know, it's very simple when you think about it and hear it out loud, of course, of whenever someone's messing up, right? Whenever you're making them mistakes, you don't see that you're making them. And so that's why when he's saying, oh, with knowledge, because when you're doing something good and becoming a better person, right? When you say being sober as opposed to being drunk, you're like, oh yes, being drunk is bad. And you know this because you're striving towards excellence. You're having the good virtue in general, not even just amongst Christianity, but you're doing the good thing. And so by doing the good thing, you're also gaining knowledge about the bad thing and in general to say, yes, this is bad. As opposed to when you're doing the bad thing, you're like, who's to say? Right? When you're drunk, you don't know what right or wrong is or anything because you're drunk or something like that. I think that's really good. You can understand sleep when you're awake, yada, yada, yada. I like that. That's really good. I appreciate that. Let me check if my friends are on. Okay, they are not yet, which makes sense. It's not quite 9. Let's see. We got another chapter. I think we can get through it. I think I can do it. Chapter 5, Sexual Morality. We must now consider Christian morality as regards sex. Now, Christian morality as regards sex. What Christians call the virtue of chastity. The Christian rule of chastity must not be confused with the social rule of modesty in one sense of that word, i.e. propriety or decency. The social rule of propriety lays down how much of the human body should be displayed, what subjects can be referred to, and in what words according to the customs of a given social circle. Thus, while the rule of chastity is the same for all Christians at all times, the rule of propriety changes. A girl in the Pacific Islands wearing hardly any clothes and a Victorian lady completely covered in clothes might both be equally modest, quote unquote, proper or decent according to the standards of their own societies, and both, for all we could tell by their dress, might be equally chaste or equally unchaste. Or chaste, I forgot how you pronounce that word. Some of the language which chaste women used in Shakespeare's time would have been used in the 19th century only by a woman completely abandoned. When people break the rule of propriety, current in their own time and place, if they do so in order to excite lust in themselves or others, then they are offending against chastity. But if they break it through ignorance or carelessness, they are guilty only of bad manners. Okay, I think I get what he's kind of getting at with this general chapter, but obviously it's specified. When, as often happens, they break it defiantly in order to shock or embrace others, they are not necessarily being unchaste, but they are being uncharitable. For it is uncharitable to take pleasure in making other people uncomfortable. I do not think that a very strict or fussy standard of propriety is any proof of chastity or any help to it, and I therefore regard the great relaxation and simplify of the rule which has taken place in my own lifetime as a good thing. At its present stage, however, it has in this inconvenience that people of different ages and different types do not all acknowledge the same standard, and we hardly know where we are. While this confusion lasts, I think that old-fashioned people should be very careful not to assume that young or emancipated people are corrupt whenever they are, by the old standard, of course. Improper, and in return, that young people should not call their elders prudes or Puritans because they do not easily adopt the new standard. A real desire to believe all the good you can of others and to make others as comfortable as you can will solve most of the problems. Chastity is the most unpopular of the Christian virtues. There is no getting away from it. The Christian rule is either marriage with complete faithfulness to your partner or else total abstinence. Now this is so difficult and so contrary to our instincts that obviously either Christianity is wrong or our sexual instinct, as it is now, has gone wrong. One or the other. Of course, being a Christian, I think it is the instinct which has gone wrong. Duh. But I have other reasons for thinking so. The biological purpose of sex is children, just as the biological purpose of eating is to repair the body. Or nourishment? I feel like that would be the easier way to put it. Now, if we eat whenever we feel inclined, and just as much as we want, it is quite true most of us will eat too much, but not terrifically too much. What does that mean? One man may eat enough for 2, but he does not eat enough for 10. The appetite goes a little beyond its biological purpose, but not enormously. But if a healthy young man indulged his sexual appetite whenever he felt inclined, and if each act produced a baby, then in 10 years he might easily populate a small village. Bang. This appetite is in ludicrous and preposterous excess of its function. Or take it another way, you can get a large audience together for a striptease act. Is that like just a stripper basically? Or like, I guess, yeah, just like a strip bar, whatever. I don't do that type of stuff. If it wasn't obvious, I don't know. It is to watch a girl, oh I am, right? To watch a girl undress on stage. Now suppose you come to a country where you could fill a theater by simply bringing a covered plate onto the stage, and then slowly lifting the cover so as to let everyone see, just before the lights went out, that it contained a mutton chop or a bit of bacon. Would you not think that in this country something has gone wrong with the appetite for food? And I would not, anyone who had grown up in a different world, think there was something equally queer about the state of the sex instinct among us. I love these old-fashioned use of words and very blunt, simple phrasing. Also, it's hard to read sometimes. One critic said that if he found a country in which such striptease acts with food were popular, he would conclude that the people of that country were starving. He meant, of course, to imply that such things as the striptease act, don't call it that, man, resulted not from sexual corruption, but from sexual starvation. I agree with him that if, in some strange land, we found that similar acts with mutton chops were popular, one of the possible explanations which could occur to me would be famine. I understand what he's saying. But the next step would be to test our hypothesis by finding out whether, in fact, much or little food was being consumed in that country. If the evidence showed that a good deal was being eaten, then of course we should have to abandon the hypothesis of starvation and try to think of another one. In the same way, before accepting sexual starvation as the cause of the striptease, we should have to look for evidence that there is in fact more sexual abstinence in our age than in those ages when things like the striptease were unknown. But surely there is no such evidence. Contraceptives have made sexual indulgence far less costly within marriage and far safer outside it than before, and public opinion is less hostile to illicit unions and even to perversion than it has been since pagan times. Nor is the hypothesis of starvation the only one we can imagine. Everyone knows that the sexual appetite, like our other appetites, grows by indulgence. Starving men may think much about food, but so do gluttons, the gorged as well as the famished, like titillations? Titillations. Is that how you... I don't know that word. Here is a third point. You find very few people who want to eat things that are not food, or to eat things that are not food, or to do other things with food instead of eating it. In other words, perversions of the food appetite are rare, but perversions of the sex instinct are numerous, hard to cure, and frightful. I am sorry to have to go into all these details, but I must. The reason why I must is that you and I, for the last 20 years, have been fed all day long on good, solid lies about sex. We have been told till one is sick of hearing it, that sexual desire is in the same state as any of our other natural desires, and that if only we abandon the silly old Victorian idea of hushing it up, everything in the garden will be lovely. It is not true. The moment you look at the facts and away from the propaganda, you see that it is not. They tell you sex has become a mess because it was hushed up, but for the last 20 years it has not been. It has been chattered about all day long, yet it is still in a mess. If hushing up had been the cause of the trouble, ventilation would have set it right, but it has not. I think it is the other way around. I think the human race originally hushed it up because it had become such a mess. Modern people are always saying sex is nothing to be ashamed of. They mean to say two things. They may mean, quote, there is nothing to be ashamed of in the fact that the human race reproduces itself in a certain way, nor in the fact that it gives pleasure, end quote. If they mean that, they are right. Christianity says the same. It is not the thing nor the pleasure that is the trouble. The old Christian teachers said that if a man had ever fallen, sexual pleasure instead of being less than it is now would actually have been greater. I know some muddle-headed Christians have talked as if Christianity thought that sex or the body or pleasure were bad in and of themselves, but they were wrong. Christianity is almost the only one of the great religions which thoroughly approves of the body, which believes that matter is good, that God himself once took on a human body, that some kind of body is going to be given to us up in heaven, even in heaven, and is going to be an essential part of our happiness, our beauty, and our energy. Christianity has glorified marriage more than any other religion, and nearly all the greatest love poetry in the world has been produced by Christians. If anyone says that sex in itself is bad, Christianity contradicts him at once. But of course, when people say, quote, sex is nothing to be ashamed of, end quote, they may mean The state into which the sexual instincts has now got is nothing to be ashamed of. The state into which... Okay, I think I get the gist of what he's saying. If they mean that, I think they are wrong. I think it is everything to be ashamed of. There's nothing to be ashamed of in enjoying your food. There would be everything to be ashamed of if half the world made food the main interest of their lives and spent their time looking at pictures of food and dribbling and smacking their lips. You're painting quite the picture, dude. I do not say you and I are individually responsible for the present situation. Our ancestors have handed over to us organisms which are warped in this respect, and we grow up surrounded by propaganda in favor of unchastity. There are people who want to keep our sex instinct inflamed in order to make money out of us, because of course, a man with an obsession is a man who has very little sales resistance. I know what he's saying. God knows our situations. He will not judge us as if we had no difficulties to overcome. What matters is the sincerity and perverseness of our will to overcome them. Excuse me. Before we can be cured, we must want to be cured. Those who really wish for help will get it. But for many modern people, even the wish is difficult. It is easy to think that we want something when we do not really want it. A famous Christian long ago told us that when he was a young man, he prayed constantly for chastity. But years later, he realized that while his lips had been saying, "Oh Lord, make me chaste," his heart had been secretly adding, but please don't do it just yet. Okay. This may happen in prayers for other virtues too, but there are 3 reasons why it is now specifically difficult for us to desire, let alone to achieve complete chastity. How long is this chapter, bro? Where is it? Complete chastity, there we go. In the first place, our warped natures, the devils who tempt us, and all the contemporary propaganda for lust combine to make us feel that desires we are resisting are so natural, so healthy, and so reasonable that it is the most perverse and abnormal to resist them. Poster after poster, film after film, novel after novel, associate the idea of sexual indulgence with the ideas of health, normality, youth, frankness, and good humor. Now, this association is a lie. Like all powerful lies, it is based on a truth. The truth acknowledged above, that sex in itself, apart from the excess and obsessions that have gone around it, is normal and healthy and all the rest of it. The lie consists in the suggestion that any sexual act to which you are tempted at the moment is also healthy and normal. Now this, on any conceivable view, and quite apart from Christianity, must be nonsense. Surrender to all our desires obviously leads to impotence, disease, jealousies, lies, concealment? Yep. And everything that is the reverse of health, good, humor, and frankness. For any happiness, even in this world, quite a lot of restraint is going to be necessary. So the claim made by every desire, when it is strong to be healthy and reasonable, counts for nothing. Every sane and civilized man must have some set of principles by which he chooses to reject some of his desires and to permit others. One man does this on Christian principles, another on hygienic principles, another on sociological? Is that how you pronounce that? Principles. The real conflict is not between Christianity and nature, but between Christian principles and other principles in the control of nature. For nature, in the sense of natural desire, will have to be controlled anyway unless you're going to ruin your whole life. Their Christian principles are admittedly stricter than the others, but then we think you will get help towards obeying them, which you will not get towards obeying the others. In the second place, many people are deterred from seriously attempting Christian chastity because they think, before trying, that it is impossible. But when a thing has to be attempted, one must never think about possibility or impossibility. Faced with an optional question is an examination paper. One considers whether one can do it or not. Faced with a compulsory question, one must do the best one can. You may get marks for every imperfect answer. You will certainly get none for leaving the questions alone. Not only in examinations, but in war, in mountain climbing, in learning to skate or swim or ride a bicycle. Even in fasting a stiff collar with cold fingers, people quite often do what seemed impossible before they did it. It is wonderful what you can do when you have to. You may indeed be sure that if perfect chastity, like perfect charity, will not be attained by any mere human efforts, you must ask for God's help. Even when you have done so, it may seem to you for a long time that no help, or less help than you need is being given. Never mind, after each failure, ask forgiveness, pick yourself up, and try again. Very often, what God first helps us towards is not the virtue itself, but just this, power of always trying again. For however important chastity, or courage, or truthfulness, or any other virtue may be, this process trains us in habits of the soul, which are more important still. It cures our illusions about ourselves and teaches us to depend on God. We learn, on one hand, that we cannot trust ourselves even in our best moments, and on the other, that we need not despair even in our worst, for our failures are forgiven. The only fatal thing is to sit down content with anything less than perfection. Thirdly, people often misunderstand what psychology teaches about repressions. It teaches us that repressed sex is dangerous, but repressed is here a technical term. It does not mean suppressed in the sense of denied or resisted. A repressed desire or thought is one which has been thrust into a subconscious, usually at a very early age, and can now come before the mind only in a disguised and unrecognizable form. Repressed sexuality does not appear to the patient to be sexuality at all. When an adolescent or an adult is engaged in resisting a conscious desire, he is not dealing with a repression, nor is he in the least danger of creating a repression. On the contrary, those who are seriously attempting chastity are more conscious and soon know a great deal more about their own sexuality than anyone else. They come to know their desires as Wellington knew Napoleon, or as Sherlock Holmes knew Moriarty. I forget that's the character's name. As it tells you, this tells you how like old and how long ago in the distant past this guy is from. As a rat catcher knows rats or a plumber knows about leaky pipes, virtue, even attempted virtue, brings light, indulgence brings fog. That's nice. Finally, though, I have had to speak at some length about sex. I want to make it as clear as I possibly can that the center of Christian morality is not here. If anyone thinks that Christians regard unchastity as the supreme vice, he is quite wrong. The sins of the flesh are bad, but they are the least bad of all sins. All the worst pleasures are purely spiritual. The pleasure of putting other people in the wrong, of bossing and patronizing, and spoiling sport, and backbiting the pleasures of power or of hatred. For there are two things inside me, competing with the human self which I must try to become. They are the animal self and the diabolical self. The diabolical self is the worst of the two. That is why a cold, self-righteous prig who does not regularly to church may be far nearer to hell than a prostitute. But of course, it is better to be neither. Okay, that was quite the chapter. That's always a fun topic to talk about. How long has this been going on? Let me check. Only 30 minutes. Okay, I got my video right there basically now. I mean, I think he loses me a little bit at the end in this chapter, just a little bit, like middle-ish end, right? So like the last third, in terms of talking about, obviously in terms of saying this can be applied to any virtue and vice and like thing you struggle with. It could be like say a substance abuse or just like, you know, food or whatever it may be. But in regards to talking about this subject of like sexuality and sex and whatever, as Christians, you got it right in the beginning, right? Sex is how people are made. It's a natural thing. God designed it. He wants us to do that. But I think also he's kind of going along and he kind of loses me a little bit. At least maybe just old-timey words. But in saying at the end, I don't know actually. At the end, or no, yeah, we're here talking about like repressed and like not repressed and subconscious things. I kind of get that what he's saying there, but then also talking about these other virtues and things in terms of attempting it and trying it. I don't quite get what he's saying there. At least in terms of, I think he's saying to try it, because I think even if people say try to do the thing, they're more aware of it, right? I think I like his example with drinking. Someone who's trying to say abstain from alcohol will know and is very conscious about the decisions and their desires, right? If someone is an alcoholic and they're trying to abstain from drinking, they know probably better than anyone for themselves that they have this really strong desire to do this thing, to drink, but they're not doing it. And they get that desire and they don't want to do it. Which is good. And he's just talking then about that itself here in regards to the big, weird, uncomfortable subject somewhat of sex. And I hope that he doesn't bring this up again, because I kind of care more about this, about the theology part of Christianity and stuff, not really necessarily about these things. I think they come into it and fall into place somewhat. Like he's saying, that stuff can be applied to many virtues and vices and such, which is true in terms of, yeah, just don't overindulge. And I think how he ends it here about there's like the animal self and the diabolical self, and you're kind of trying to choose between the two or like balance between them, or those are the two like worst things in you. There are two things inside of me, right? There's two wolves inside me, competing with the human self, which I must try to become. I don't know. This chapter in and of itself, weird. Okay, let me see how long until they're on. I think we'll call it there. There. Is this that also that chapter seemed a little bit? No, this next one of 104. That's also that'll be next readings, which will be 104.